Dexter Resurrection has been an amazing show so far, and with the grand finale right around the corner, that means one thing. Literally everyone is throwing out crazy theories about how the show will finally come to an end. And today, I'll be going over the craziest theories about the ending of Dexter Resurrection, starting with a dark one.
Al, you know, the one serial killer from the Boogeyman Club who somehow didn't end up on Dexter's table. And honestly, that might be the biggest mistake Dexter's ever made. But before we dive into why Al's gonna be the key to everything, let me paint you a picture of just how dangerous this guy really is. Al seemed harmless at first, right? Loving father, warm smile, the kind of guy you trust to watch your kids. But episode 7 ripped that mask clean off. And what we found underneath was absolutely terrifying. This dude has perfected the art of deception in ways that make other serial killers look like amateurs. He targets joggers by faking injuries, something so simple, so believable, that his victims literally run toward their own deaths trying to help him. But here's where it gets really sick. Al doesn't just kill them quickly, he strangles them slowly, savoring every second as he feels their life drain away. Then, while they're dying, he cuts off their ponytails and starts giggling like a demented child having the time of his life. Those childlike laughs, that visible regression, it's not random. Al is reliving something from his past, and that fake family man persona is just another layer of his psychological damage. Sound familiar? It should, because we've seen this exact pattern before with Arthur Mitchell, the Trinity Killer. Arthur wore the perfect family man mask too, coached Little League, went to church, seemed like the ideal suburban dad, but underneath, he was reliving his childhood trauma through murder, placing himself in the role of a young boy during his kills. The parallels between Al and Arthur are terrifying. Both use their family image as camouflage. Both regress to childlike states during their murders. Both have that same disturbing blend of nurturing exterior and psychotic interior. But here's what makes Al potentially more dangerous than Arthur ever was. He's learned to blend in better. Arthur had patterns, rituals that eventually led to his downfall. Al's method is simpler, cleaner, harder to track. Episode 8 makes this even more concerning when it surprisingly lets Al slip away. Dexter had him right there, vulnerable, and Al just walks away into the night. Now, Al's thrown his phone in the road, which means he has no clue that Dexter was pretending to be Red this whole time. He doesn't know that Prater figured out the impersonation. He thinks his fellow Boogeyman Club members just mysteriously vanished. But here's where Al's story gets really interesting, and why I think he's about to become the season's final boss. Leon Prater isn't just some rich guy collecting serial killer trophies. This dude has serious resources. Money, connections, a network that spans law enforcement agencies. If he wants to find someone, he's gonna find them. Once Prater tracks down Al and fills him in on what really happened, we're looking at a grieving serial killer with nothing left to lose. Al genuinely cared about his fellow club members. He saw them as kindred spirits, maybe the only people who truly understood him. And now he's gonna learn that one man, Dexter Morgan, systematically hunted down and murdered every single one of them. But Al's not gonna go after Dexter directly. That would be too simple, too expected. Remember what Dexter told him back in episode 7? That if his mask ever fell, his family would only see darkness and be completely disgusted with him.
If you ever let your mask slip, the good husband and perfect father would...
Al didn't take that warning well at all. You could see it hit him like a physical blow. That line wasn't just dialogue. It was foreshadowing for exactly how Al's gonna get his revenge. He's not gonna kill Dexter. He's gonna do something infinitely worse. He's gonna destroy Dexter's relationship with Harrison by targeting the one person Harrison actually loves, Elsa. Think about it from Al's twisted perspective. Dexter took away Al's family, his fellow killers. So Al's gonna take away Dexter's family in return. But not Dexter himself, and not even Harrison directly. He's gonna kill Elsa, and he's gonna make sure Harrison knows exactly why it happened. That Dexter's past, Dexter's choices, Dexter's victims are the reason an innocent girl is dead. This would completely shatter Harrison's world. He's been struggling with his relationship with his father, trying to find his place, trying to be normal. Elsa represents everything good and pure in his life, his chance at a real relationship, a normal future. If Al kills her because of Dexter's actions, it's gonna push Harrison over the edge in ways we haven't seen yet. But here's where the theory gets really dark, and why it might be the perfect setup for season 2. Harrison's gonna hunt down Al, and when he kills him, that's gonna make 3 total kills. The supposed death of Dexter back in New Blood, Ryan Foster in Resurrection, and now Al. By the FBI's definition, that officially makes Harrison a serial killer. But the twisted part? Harrison's pattern isn't about satisfying dark urges like his father. It's about protection and justice. When he thought he killed Dexter, it was to prevent him from hurting more innocent people like Logan, the purest person Harrison knew, who became a father figure to him. When he killed Ryan Foster, it was to protect a helpless victim who couldn't protect themselves. And if he kills Al, it'll be pure revenge for Elsa, the girl he loved, murdered because of his father's sins. This justice motivation runs deep in the Morgan bloodline, but it's also what makes Harrison potentially more dangerous than Dexter ever was. Dexter killed to satisfy his dark passenger. Harrison kills for what he believes are righteous reasons. A serial killer who genuinely believes he's doing good? That's terrifying, because there's no limit to what he'll justify. Season 2 could follow Harrison's descent into this twisted sense of justice, hunting down people he deems deserving of death. And unlike Dexter's careful, methodical approach, Harrison's kills would be emotional, impulsive, driven by rage and grief. The worst part? Dexter would have to watch his son become everything he tried to protect him from.
Maybe we're not as alike as I thought.
Knowing it's entirely his fault. But that's just theory number 1, and trust me, it gets even crazier from here. Before you watch any further, I'm happy to finally announce that I'm releasing the first limited drop of my t-shirts. At the start, there are only 100 available, so make sure you buy them while you can at dtmerch.store. Enjoy the video. Angel Batista. Everyone's been worried he's gonna die this season, but what if I told you his actual fate might be way worse than death? Because what's happening to Angel Batista right now isn't just about catching Dexter. It's a systematic destruction of everything he's worked for, everything he represents, and it's being orchestrated by the one person who knows exactly how to manipulate the system. Let me walk you through how Dexter's been playing chess while everyone else is playing checkers. The seeds of Angel's downfall were planted way back in season 7, and most people missed it completely. When Dexter meets Detective Wallace, she casually mentions that Angel came to see her about the Jim Lindsay case.
Your old colleague, Angel Batista, paid me a visit.
Now, a normal person might just answer her questions and move on, but Dexter? He immediately switches into manipulation mode and starts planting seeds of doubt about Angel's mental state. He tells Wallace that Angel was never the same after the James Dokes situation, that LaGuerta's death pushed him into isolation and a downward spiral. Pure lies, obviously, but Dexter's smart enough to know that you don't have to prove someone is crazy, you just have to make people think they might be. And Wallace is the perfect target for this manipulation, because she doesn't know Angel personally. To her, he's just some retired Miami cop who's suddenly obsessed with a case that seems straightforward. But Dexter doesn't stop there. Episode 8 is where his master plan really comes together, and it's honestly brilliant in the most twisted way possible. Angel gets seconds away from catching Dexter red-handed at the kill site. He's got the location, he's got the timing, he knows Dexter was there. For a moment, it looks like 20 years of investigation are finally gonna pay off. But when Detective Wallace and Oliva show up, there's absolutely nothing tying Dexter to the scene. No evidence, no traces, nothing. So Angel looks frantic, desperately insisting that Dexter was there without being able to prove it. To Wallace and Oliva, he doesn't look like a seasoned detective following solid leads. He looks like an obsessed man chasing shadows. Then Angel admits he's been tracking Dexter's car with a GPS device.
I left my AirPods in his car, so I ended up using them.
Now, under normal circumstances, this might seem like good police work, But the trackers mysteriously vanished, which makes Angel look even more paranoid and potentially unstable. When he tries to show them a recording, you can literally see Wallace and Oliva exchanging concerned looks. They're not wondering if Angel's right about Dexter, they're wondering if Angel's lost his grip on reality. And remember, this isn't happening in isolation. Back in episode 3, Angel suddenly retired from Miami Metro, talking about chasing something he couldn't let go of, but refusing to give anyone details about what exactly he was investigating. Even Quinn, his close friend and longtime partner, thought Angel's behavior was crazy. If Quinn, someone who's known Angel for years and trusts his instincts, thinks he's acting irrationally, what are strangers gonna think? All of this creates a perfect storm where Angel's colleagues don't see him as Miami Metro's respected veteran anymore. They see a broken man who's become obsessed with a suspect to the point where he might be fabricating evidence or losing touch with reality. But here's what makes this theory really tragic. Angel isn't wrong about anything. His instincts are perfect, his investigation is solid, and his conclusions about Dexter are completely accurate. But perception is reality, and Dexter's managed to poison everyone's perception of Angel's credibility. This is psychological warfare at its finest, and Angel doesn't even realize he's fighting it. So how does this end? I think it's going to be spectacular and heartbreaking at the same time. Leon Prater's gala is going to be the perfect setting for Angel's final downfall. Think about it. You've got law enforcement from multiple agencies, media attention, and a room full of people who respect professionalism and evidence-based conclusions. Angel's gonna be there, still carrying this obsession with exposing Dexter. And at some point, his desperation is gonna boil over. Maybe he sees Dexter getting honored or recognized. Maybe he overhears people praising Jim Lindsay for his police work. Whatever the trigger, Angel's gonna snap. He'll try to expose Dexter publicly in front of everyone without any solid proof they can see. His quote-unquote madness, really just his frustration at being so close to the truth without being able to prove it, will erupt for everyone to witness. Picture it. Angel Batista, respected veteran of Miami Metro, reduced to ranting about serial killers and cover-ups, while Dexter stands there looking concerned and sympathetic. Everyone in that room will think they're watching a man have a complete mental breakdown. It'll be social and professional suicide. Angel will lose whatever credibility he has left, and worse, he'll probably lose the respect of people like Quinn who've stood by him this long. But from Dexter's perspective, it's perfect. He eliminates the biggest threat to his identity without having to kill anyone. Angel will still be alive, but he'll be completely neutralized. Just another crazy ex-cop with wild theories that nobody takes seriously. It's a fate worse than death for someone like Angel, whose entire identity is built around being a good cop who protects people and seeks justice. And it sets up season 2 beautifully, because Dexter will be free to operate in New York without the one person who truly understood who he was looking over his shoulder. The really sick part? Angel will probably spend the rest of his life knowing the truth but being unable to convince anyone else. He'll watch Dexter continue killing, continue manipulating, continue destroying lives, and he'll be powerless to stop it because he's been labeled as mentally unstable. That's not just losing, that's being systematically destroyed by the very person you're trying to stop. But speaking of people being systematically destroyed, let's talk about the New York Ripper theories, because this is where things get absolutely insane. The New York Ripper. This shadow has been haunting every episode since Prater first mentioned him back in episode 4.
This was the New York Rippers, a man who terrorized the streets I once played on as a child.
And I've spent way too much time thinking about who this killer really is. But before I get into my theories, let me remind you why the New York Ripper's identity matters so much to the overall story. This isn't just some random serial killer that Wallace is obsessed with. Prater has the Ripper's weapon, his most prized trophy. That means he had direct contact with this killer, which means the Ripper's story is connected to Prater's story, which makes it connected to everything happening in New York right now. My first theory is gonna sound crazy, but stick with me because the evidence actually supports it. I think the New York Ripper is Jonah Mitchell, Trinity Killer's son. Now, most people forgot about Jonah after season 6, but his story never really ended. It just stopped. And in a show like Dexter, stories don't just stop unless there's a reason. Let me refresh your memory on exactly what happened with Jonah, because the details are crucial to understanding this theory. Back in season 6, episode 7, but it wasn't random violence, it was the culmination of years of psychological abuse and family trauma. After Arthur's arrest and death, the Mitchell family completely fell apart. Jonah's sister couldn't handle their mother's constant blame and criticism. She blamed the kids for Arthur leaving, for bringing shame on the family, for everything that went wrong. The psychological pressure was so intense that Jonah's sister committed suicide. She literally couldn't live with the guilt and shame their mother heaped on them every single day. That's when Jonah snapped. He killed his mother in a moment of pure rage. But here's the important part. When Dexter confronts him about it, Jonah's behavior is all over the place. He's erratic, switching between aggression and remorse, showing classic signs of someone with a severe personality disorder. One minute he's trying to kill Dexter, the next minute he's begging Dexter to kill him because he can't live with what he's done. That level of psychological instability doesn't just disappear. If anything, it gets worse over time without proper treatment. Dexter's response to Jonah's breakdown was telling too. Instead of seeing him as a threat or a victim, Dexter told him to survive and then just disappeared. No follow-up, no checking to see if Jonah got help, nothing. That was the last canonical appearance of Jonah Mitchell in the entire series. Until season 11, episode 8, when we got a very interesting Easter egg that most people missed. When Dexter's going through Oliver Saxton's computer files, there's a folder labeled J. Mitchell sitting right there in plain sight. Now, it was never officially confirmed that this refers to Jonah, but come on, what are the odds of that being a coincidence? If that file is about Jonah, it tells us something crucial. Dr. Vogel was tracking him. Think about the timeline here. Dr. Vogel was obsessed with studying psychopaths, especially ones with interesting developmental patterns. A young man who killed his mother after watching his serial killer father destroy his family, that's exactly the kind of case study she'd want to monitor. So my theory is that after Dexter left him to survive, Jonah ended up under Dr. Vogel's care. She probably helped him manage his psychological issues, gave him coping mechanisms, maybe even helped him channel his violent impulses in non-lethal ways. But then Dr. Vogel died in season 8, leaving Jonah without his psychological anchor. That's when Jonah becomes the New York Ripper. Think about it, the Ripper's methods are brutal but controlled. He's not just lashing out randomly like Jonah did when he killed his mother. He's developed a system, a ritual, a way of managing his psychological needs through murder. But here's where the theory gets really interesting. The New York Ripper suddenly stopped killing. Wallace mentions this multiple times. He was active, prolific, and then just vanished. Why would a serial killer suddenly stop? Usually it's because they're dead, imprisoned, or they found another outlet for their urges. I think Jonah found a new guide to help him manage his impulses, and that guide is Leon Prater. Listen to how Prater talks about the New York Ripper in episode 4. There's familiarity in his voice, almost affection. He calls the Ripper highly prolific, but emphasizes that he was never caught. And there's something almost proud in the way he says it.
Highly prolific. Never caught. Must be nice.
The only other time we hear that same emotional tone from Prater is when he talks about Cooper Morris, the killer who murdered his parents.
I felt so connected to him.
That's not coincidence. That's a pattern. Both Prater and Jonah were left alone in the world because of serial killers. Cooper Morris destroyed Prater's family. Arthur Mitchell destroyed Jonah's. They understand each other's trauma in a way nobody else could. So here's how I think it worked. Prater discovered Jonah's identity as the New York Ripper, but instead of turning him in, he saw a kindred spirit. Someone else who'd been victimized by the system's failures. Someone else who understood what it meant to have your entire world destroyed by a psychopath. Prater offered Jonah something he'd never had before, unconditional acceptance and support. But in exchange, Jonah had to stop killing. That's why Prater has the Ripper's weapon. It's not a trophy from a killer he defeated. It's a symbol of a killer he saved. The weapon represents everything Prater himself could have become if the system hadn't given him a path to channel his trauma into something positive. But Jonah's psychological needs don't just disappear because he stopped killing. He still needs an outlet for his violent impulses, his need to inflict psychological pain. That's where the phone calls come in. The New York Ripper still torments victims' families with calls, but now it's not connected to active murders. Jonah uses these calls to manage his psychological urges without actually killing anyone. And Prater enables this by using his network of contacts within law enforcement to get victims' family phone numbers and ensure the calls can't be traced back to Jonah. It's a twisted form of therapy, but it works. Jonah gets to feed his psychological needs, and Prater gets to feel like he saved someone from becoming what Cooper Morris was. This theory also creates a perfect parallel to Brian's story. Both Brian and Jonah were abandoned by the system after experiencing childhood trauma. The only difference is that Brian was never rescued, while Jonah found Prater. Now, fast forward to the cliffhanger at the end of episode 8. Prater's about to learn Dexter's real identity, which means he's also going to learn about Dexter's history with the Mitchell family. Imagine Prater telling Jonah that the man who killed his father, the man who destroyed his family, is alive and working as a police consultant in New York under a fake name. Jonah's gonna want revenge, but this time he'll have Prater's resources and protection behind him. Picture the season finale, Jonah appearing in the final shot, his trademark hook in hand saying, "Hello, Dexter Morgan." The psychological impact would be devastating for Dexter. He thought he was done with the Mitchell family, thought that chapter of his life was closed, but the sins of the past have a way of catching up. And knowing that Brian's supposed to have a cameo before the series ends, what if he appears in response to Jonah's return? What if we get a confrontation between Dexter's brother and Trinity's son, with Dexter caught in the middle? That would bring Dexter's story full circle in the most twisted way possible. But hold on, because I've got another theory about the New York Ripper's identity that's even more connected to the current storyline. What if I told you the New York Ripper wasn't some random serial killer from the past, but someone directly connected to the Gemini killer case that Dexter just solved? What if the reason Detective Wallace is so obsessed with the New York Ripper case isn't professional dedication, but personal guilt? What if Wallace knows exactly who the New York Ripper is, and she's the reason he stopped killing? This theory suggests that the Gemini killer wasn't just twins, they were triplets, and the third sibling was the original New York Ripper. I know it sounds wild, but hear me out because the evidence actually supports this. First, let's talk about Detective Wallace's obsession with the Ripper case. This isn't normal investigative behavior. She's so fixated on solving it that she's willing to risk her career, work unpaid overtime, and maintain a detailed investigation board years after the case went cold. That level of personal investment usually means one thing: it's personal. Wallace has never been able to let go of this case, and I think it's because she knows the killer's identity. Specifically, she knows it's her own brother. Think about the timeline here. The New York Ripper was active for a while, then suddenly stopped. Around the same time, the Gemini killer started operating with a completely different MO. What if one of the triplets was originally working alone as the New York Ripper until his siblings discovered what he was doing? Picture this scenario. Claudette Wallace discovers that one of her brothers is the New York Ripper. She's horrified, but he's still her brother. She can't bring herself to turn him in, but she also can't let him keep killing innocent people. So she makes a deal with him. Stop the Ripper killings, abandon that identity completely, and she'll keep his secret. But her other brother, the one who becomes the arrogant half of the Gemini duo, gets fascinated by the whole thing. Instead of being disgusted like Claudette, he sees an opportunity. He convinces the Ripper brother to team up with him, to create a new killing partnership with a different method, different victims, different signature. The Gemini killer is born. This explains why Prater has the New York Ripper's weapon. When the brothers decided to abandon the Ripper identity, they needed to dispose of the evidence, but instead of destroying it, they gave it to Prater, maybe as a gesture of trust, maybe as insurance. For Prater, that weapon represents something different than his other trophies. It's not from a killer he caught or defeated, it's from killers who chose to change their methods, possibly at his suggestion. Remember Prater's weird comment about Gareth being an incel? That seemed random since the Gemini killer didn't exclusively target women. But if Gareth was originally the New York Ripper, and the Ripper did target women specifically, then that comment makes perfect sense. The phone call we hear from the Ripper in episode 7 supports this too.
She thought she could run. She didn't have anywhere to go in that shitty little house of hers.
It's distinctly misogynistic. That's not just sadistic. It's specifically targeted at women, with undertones of sexual violence and family destruction. This suggests that the arrogant, egocentric Gareth we met was originally channeling his psychological issues through violence against women before his brother convinced him to expand their operation. But here's where it gets really tragic for Wallace. I think she believes one of her brothers killed the other. She reported this to the police, but they didn't believe her. Why would they? A detective claiming her own brother was a serial killer who killed her other brother? It sounds like the paranoid delusion of someone under too much stress. Her insistence on this crazy theory nearly cost her her career, just like Angel's obsession with Dexter is destroying his credibility now. The parallel between Wallace and Angel is probably intentional. Both are good cops whose dedication to the truth makes them look unstable to their colleagues. So Wallace has spent years knowing that her brother was a killer, believing he murdered their sibling, and being unable to convince anyone else of the truth. That's why she can't let go of the New York Ripper case. It's not about justice for the victims, it's about justice for her family. So Wallace has spent years knowing that her brother was a killer, believing he murdered their sibling, and being unable to convince anyone else of the truth. That's why she can't let go of the New York Ripper case. It's not about justice for the victims, it's about justice for her family. This theory also explains why the weapon was so important to Prater. It's not just another trophy, it's evidence of his ability to rehabilitate killers, to guide them toward better expressions of their psychological needs. From Prater's perspective, he took the New York Ripper, a chaotic, woman-hating killer, and helped transform him into half of the more sophisticated Gemini operation. The season could end with Wallace finally learning the truth about what really happened to her brothers and realizing that the man she's been working with, Dexter, was the one who killed them both. Season 2 could then follow Wallace's crisis of conscience as she decides whether to pursue justice for her brothers or justice for their victims. And if Prater recruits Dexter to help solve the ongoing New York Ripper case, the irony would be perfect. Dexter would be hunting for a killer who's already dead, killed by Dexter himself, while the killer's sister unknowingly helps him. It would be psychological torture for everyone involved, which is exactly the kind of twisted storytelling Dexter excels at. But here's what ties all these theories together, and why I think the season finale is gonna blow our minds. Leon Prater isn't just some rich guy with a serial killer hobby. He's the puppet master, pulling strings we haven't even noticed yet. Think about everything we know about Prater. He's wealthy enough to fund private investigations, connected enough to access crime scene evidence, and smart enough to identify patterns that official investigators miss. But more importantly, he's personally invested in every single case he collects trophies from. The Cooper-Morris connection shows us that Prater doesn't just study killers. He studies the intersection between killers and the system that creates them. Every trophy in his collection represents a failure of the justice system to protect victims or rehabilitate perpetrators. Prater isn't just collecting serial killer memorabilia, he's building a catalog of systemic failures. And now he's discovered Dexter Morgan, the ultimate example of both sides of that equation. Dexter is simultaneously a victim of the system, a traumatized child who wasn't properly helped, and a perpetrator who's been enabled by the same system for decades. The season finale is gonna reveal that Prater has known about Dexter's real identity for longer than anyone realized. The whole Jim Lindsay investigation was never about solving cases. It was about studying Dexter up close. Prater's been watching Dexter work, analyzing his methods, understanding his psychology, all while pretending to be a helpful civilian consultant. The question is, what's Prater's endgame? I think he's planning to offer Dexter the same deal he offered Jonah and potentially the Gemini twins. Stop the chaotic, impulsive killing and join a more organized, systematic operation. Prater wants to create a network of reformed killers working under his guidance, channeling their psychological needs into something he considers more productive. From his perspective, he's not enabling murder. He's preventing worse outcomes by giving killers structure and purpose. This season finale could reveal that Prater has been building this network for years, and Dexter represents the crown jewel of his collection. But Dexter's not going to go quietly. He's spent his entire life maintaining control over his own narrative, his own methods, his own targets. The idea of answering to someone else, even someone as sophisticated as Prater, goes against everything Dexter believes about himself. That sets up a season 2 conflict between Dexter and Prater's network, with Harrison caught in the middle trying to figure out which side represents justice and which side represents manipulation. And that brings us to the most important element of all these theories, Harrison's role in everything that's about to happen. Throughout this season, Harrison's been trying to find his place in the world, struggling with his relationship with his father, and attempting to build a normal life with people like Elsa. But every single theory I've outlined ends with Harrison being pushed toward violence. If Al kills Elsa for revenge, Harrison's gonna hunt him down and kill him. If Jonah Mitchell returns seeking revenge on Dexter, Harrison's gonna have to choose between protecting his father and allowing justice to be served. If the New York Ripper's identity is revealed and it creates chaos in the NYPD, Harrison's gonna be caught in the middle of a war between law enforcement and serial killers. Every path leads to the same destination, Harrison becoming what Dexter always feared he would become. But here's the twist that makes this different from traditional Dexter storytelling. Harrison's not gonna kill because of a dark passenger or uncontrollable urges. He's gonna kill because he believes it's the right thing to do. That makes him infinitely more dangerous than Dexter ever was, because there's no internal conflict, no guilt, no recognition that what he's doing is wrong. Harrison will genuinely believe he's a force for justice in a world where the system has failed. And with that level of conviction, there's no limit to what he'll justify. Season 2 could show us a Harrison who's fully embraced his role as judge, jury, and executioner, systematically hunting down people he deems unworthy of life. The really terrifying part? He might be right about some of them. All of these theories create a perfect storm scenario for the season finale and beyond. Al wants revenge on Dexter for killing his friends, but he's going to target Harrison's innocent girlfriend instead. Angel's getting closer to exposing Dexter, but his credibility is being systematically destroyed. The New York Ripper's identity is going to be revealed, creating chaos within the NYPD and Prater's organization. Prater's been manipulating everyone from the beginning, building towards some larger plan that involves recruiting or controlling Dexter. And Harrison's about to be pushed into violence that will define the rest of his life. The season finale needs to address all of these plot threads while setting up season 2, and honestly, I think they're gonna do it by having everything explode at once. Prater's Gala is gonna be ground zero for revelations that destroy multiple lives simultaneously. Angel's gonna have his public breakdown. Al's gonna make his move against Elsa. The New York Ripper's identity is gonna be revealed, and Prater's gonna show his true hand regarding Dexter. By the end of the episode, half the main characters are gonna be dead. The other half are gonna have their lives completely destroyed, and Harrison's gonna be standing in the middle of it all, thinking that violence is the only solution to problems that the system can't or won't solve. That's the setup for a season 2 where Harrison becomes the main character, hunting down the people responsible for destroying everything he cared about, while Dexter watches his son become a monster that makes the Bay Harbor Butcher look restrained. The cycle continues, but this time with a killer who thinks he's the hero of the story. And honestly, given what we've seen of the justice system in this show, Harrison might not be wrong.